A rude tourist tried to pull a royal guard's moustache, mocking hundreds of years of tradition. But one quick move from the guard taught him and the watching crowd a lesson they won't forget. Here's what happened. But first, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Also, subscribe to the channel if you respect the royal guards. The warm summer breeze smelled of freshly cut grass from the royal gardens across the area outside Buckingham Palace. Tourists were gathering to watch the daily Queen's Guard ceremony. Among the respectful crowd stood Guard Thomas Baker, his red jacket bright in the sunshine, his posture as straight as the palace itself. 8 years in the army had given him more than just the right to wear this special uniform. It had taught him a level of self-control that was about to be challenged. The crowd's quiet chatter was broken by a loud, pushy voice. These blokes are seriously still doing this statue thing? Barry Smith's words were harsh and cutting. His accent showed he was used to getting his own way. Smith pushed through the crowd, his posh shirt and expensive shades making him stand out. He was fit and looked aggressive, like someone who spent more time in fancy gyms than in real fights, though he acted like a self-declared hero. "Look at this bloke," Smith announced to everyone, pointing at Guard Baker, standing there like a model from the olden days. "And look at that moustache. Is this a joke?" His voice got louder, deliberately trying to cause trouble. Some tourists moved away, creating an awkward space around Smith as he walked around the guard. Baker stayed still, looking straight ahead, his perfectly kept moustache a proud symbol of his regiment, making him look even more impressive. The sun shone on the brass buttons of his uniform, each one polished to perfection, showing both tradition and the hard work it takes. "Hey, you!" Smith mocked, getting closer to Baker. "Is that thing real, or did they stick it on with the rest of your outfit?" His words made a few people laugh nervously, but most of the crowd shuffled uncomfortably, seeing the trouble Smith was causing. A young British mum pulled her kids back, whispering about respect as they moved to a safer spot. An older couple shook their heads, the man's tie showing he understood the importance of the uniform far better than Smith did. "You know what annoys me?" Smith went on, his voice getting sharper. "Back home, our soldiers actually do something. They're not just ornaments for tourists." He stepped closer, deliberately invading the guard's personal space. "But here you are, with your fancy hat and that silly moustache, playing soldiers while real heroes protect the world." Guard Baker's eyes stayed fixed ahead, but there was a slight tension in his posture now. Not from fear, but from the controlled power that comes from years of real fighting. His moustache, carefully groomed according to old army traditions, seemed to highlight the dignified calmness of his position. Smith's face twisted into a grin as he saw the crowd's unease. "What's wrong, everyone? Scared the toy soldier might come to life?" He turned back to Baker, his voice full of mockery. "That moustache, though, it's really annoying me. Looks like something from a museum. Maybe it's time someone made you look a bit more modern." "Tell you what, mate," Smith continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as he leaned in even closer. "Let's see how real that moustache is, eh?" His hand started to rise, testing limits that had been respected for hundreds of years, about to learn a lesson in respect that no amount of rudeness could avoid. "I wouldn't do that, young man." The voice that interrupted Smith's teasing was quiet, but firm, from someone who had seen real action. Colonel Arthur Jones, a retired army historian, stepped forward from the crowd. His tie and posture showed he knew the traditions being mocked very well. Beside him stood Sergeant Major David Brown, a visiting American veteran with a special badge on his chest. The two men had been talking about the shared history of British and American armies when Smith's behavior had caught their attention. Smith barely glanced at them, his attention fixed on Guard Baker's perfect moustache. "Oh, look, the history geeks are here to tell us off," he said sarcastically. But there was something unsure in his stance now, a flicker of doubt at the impressive presence of the two veterans. "That man you're teasing," Colonel Jones spoke again, his voice carrying across the now silent courtyard. "Did 3 tours in Afghanistan. The moustache you're mocking is part of a tradition that goes back to the 1857 Indian Mutiny, earned through bravery and courage. Guard Baker remained still, but the sun caught the medals on his chest, silent proof of battles fought far from these peaceful palace grounds. His moustache, precisely trimmed to army rules, showed a commitment to tradition that went far deeper than just looks. "The Queen's Guard isn't a tourist show," Sergeant Major Brown added, his accent showing his experience. "These men are active soldiers. I served with their regiment in Helmand Province. They're some of the best soldiers I've ever known." Smith's face went red, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "Soldiers? Standing here like statues?" He moved even closer to Baker, his breath misting the guard's brass buttons. "Real soldiers are out there doing something, not playing dress-up for photos." Colonel Jones's face hardened. 2 years ago, Guard Baker led a patrol through enemy territory to rescue 3 injured Marines under heavy fire. He carried one of them 3 miles to safety. The moustache you're so keen to mock is worn by men who've earned the right through real fighting. You think this is just a show? Sergeant Major Brown pointed to Baker's uniform. Every button, every strap, every detail represents hundreds of years of service and sacrifice. That rifle he's holding? It's not a toy. These men are fighting veterans first, guardians of tradition second. Smith's hand, which had been moving towards Baker's moustache, wavered slightly. But like many people whose pride stops them admitting they're wrong, he pushed on. "Nice story, old-timer, but times change. Maybe it's time someone showed everyone here that all this tradition stuff is just for show." The sunlight caught Guard Baker's eyes for a moment, and those close enough might have seen something in them. Not anger, not fear, but the calm readiness of a soldier who had faced far worse than a rude tourist. His moustache, which had become the focus of Smith's increasingly aggressive behavior, remained as perfectly groomed as his self-control. "Last warning, son," Colonel Jones said quietly. "That uniform means more than you understand. The men who wear it have fought alongside American forces in every major war since World War I. They've earned their traditions through sacrifice and bravery." But Smith had gone too far. His hand moved closer to Baker's face, fingers reaching for the carefully kept moustache that had become a symbol of his silly challenge to authority. "Let's see how real this tradition of yours is." He grinned with nasty triumph. "Let's see how this comes." The rest of his taunt was cut off. Baker's movement was so fast, so precise, that many in the crowd would later say the guard hadn't moved at all. One moment, Smith's hand was reaching for the moustache. The next, it was trapped in a white-gloved grip of steel. The guard's ceremonial stance changed into a position of controlled combat readiness. Baker's voice cut through the shocked silence like a knife. "That was a serious mistake." The words had the quiet authority of someone who had given orders under enemy fire, each syllable measured and clear. Smith's face twisted in shock and anger as he tried to pull away, but Baker's grip was proof of years of combat training. The guard's other hand kept perfect control of his rifle, his posture still ceremonial, despite the necessary response to a direct attack. "What the—" Smith's free hand swung up, but was caught in an equally strong hold. The guard's movements were perfect army precision, minimum force, maximum control, every action designed to stop the threat without causing unnecessary harm. "By trying to attack a member of the Queen's Guard," Baker continued, his moustache now seeming less a target of ridicule and more a symbol of the authority Smith had foolishly challenged, "you've committed a serious crime under both army and normal law." The crowd was completely silent. Colonel Jones nodded grimly, while Sergeant Major Brown stepped forward, his combat experience recognizing the perfect use of controlled response. Children who had been watching now clung to their parents, seeing a real demonstration of disciplined power. 3 tours in Afghanistan." Baker's voice remained steady as he kept his hold. 2 in Iraq. This uniform isn't a costume, and this isn't a game." With precise pressure, he adjusted his grip, making Smith gasp as he was forced to his knees, more from skill than strength. Smith's designer sunglasses fell to the ground, his face now red with a different kind of embarrassment, the dawning realization of his huge mistake. "You can't. I'm a U.S. citizen." "A U.S. citizen," Sergeant Major Brown interrupted, "who just attacked a serving member of Britain's armed forces. Mate, you couldn't have made a bigger mistake if you'd tried." Baker's moustache, the object of Smith's mockery, now seemed to emphasize every word as he spoke. "We stand guard here, not because we have to, but because we've earned the right. This uniform, these traditions, they're not for show. They're symbols of sacrifice you clearly don't understand." With clinical precision, Baker adjusted his stance, the moves pure army training. The same techniques that had served in close combat, now used with perfect restraint on palace grounds. Smith found himself completely unable to move, his earlier bravado replaced by the unmistakable look of someone learning a very painful lesson. "Those who have faced real combat," Baker continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the now silent courtyard, "understand that strength isn't about mockery or disrespect. It's about self-control, control, and the wisdom to know when to use it." Colonel Jones stepped closer, his face serious. "What you're experiencing now, young man, is just a tiny bit of what these guards are capable of. They're not statues, not tourist attractions. They're combat veterans who choose to honor their duty with dignity. Now then." Guard Baker's voice remained measured, even as he kept his professionally controlled hold on Smith. "Let's discuss the real purpose of what we do here." Smith, his posh shirt now crumpled and damp with nervous sweat, had lost all traces of his earlier arrogance. The guard's grip was a perfect demonstration of army skill, firm enough to control, precise enough to avoid injury, every ounce of pressure speaking of years of professional training. "The moustache you so eagerly wanted to attack," Baker continued, "is more than just facial hair. It's a symbol of an army tradition that's older than your great-granddad. Men have died wearing this uniform, serving with honor in wars you've only seen in films." Colonel Jones stepped forward, his army historian's knowledge adding weight to the moment. "The Queen's Guard moustache tradition began in the Victorian era, during the Indian Mutiny. It became a mark of distinguished service, earned through bravery and kept with pride. Every guard you see wearing one has proven himself in real combat. Let me share something with you," Sergeant Major Brown added, his accent showing his authority. "When I served alongside the British forces in Afghanistan, we had a saying. If you see a Queen's Guard with a moustache, you're looking at someone who's seen the worst and kept his dignity." Baker adjusted his hold slightly, making sure Smith was paying full attention. 3 years ago, I led a night patrol through enemy territory, lost 2 good men, saved 4 others. The moustache you mocked? I earned it pulling an injured Marine to safety under heavy fire." Smith's face had lost all color, his earlier mockery replaced by the awful realization of who he'd actually challenged. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know." Baker's voice had no anger, only the steady authority of a combat veteran. "You saw a uniform and a tradition you didn't understand, so you assumed it was meaningless. That's the very definition of ignorance, mate." The crowd had grown larger, drawn by the unfolding lesson. Parents pointed out details to their children, the guard's perfect posture, even while restraining Smith, the precise way he kept control of his rifle, the moustache that now seemed to emphasize every word of wisdom being delivered. "In combat," Baker continued, "we learn the difference between appearance and reality. This uniform isn't worn for show. It's earned through service, kept through self-control, and honored through unwavering dedication." Colonel Jones touched his regimental tie thoughtfully. Every year, tourists like you come here thinking these guards are just for show. They forget that beneath the tradition lies the steel of modern army excellence. Today you've had the privilege of learning the difference. Back home, Sergeant Major Brown added, his voice carrying across the courtyard. We have a saying, never judge a soldier by his parade ground appearance. These men you see standing guard, they've served in the same awful places as our lads, fought the same battles, bled on the same ground. Baker's moustache caught the sunlight as he spoke again, each word measured and clear. We stand here, not because we can't do anything else, but because we've earned the right to guard something greater than ourselves. Tradition isn't weakness, mate. It's the backbone of self-control. Smith's knees were starting to ache from being held, but the pain seemed to be clearing his mind. I apologize, he managed, his voice barely a whisper. I was completely out of line. Yes, you were, Baker agreed, his tone professional rather than triumphant. But the question is, what have you learned from this? About judgment, about respect, about the difference between appearance and reality? The crowd watched in respectful silence as Smith struggled with his answer. His next words came out rough with emotion and dawning understanding. That I'm a stupid fool who confused ceremony with weakness. That I judged something I know nothing about. Progress, Baker noted, the slightest hint of approval in his voice. Perhaps now you understand why we keep these standards, why we stand our posts with such self-control. It's not for show, mate. It's because the same dedication that keeps us motionless on parade keeps us effective in combat. Colonel Jones nodded slowly. Every button on that uniform, every precise movement, every carefully kept tradition, including that moustache you found so funny, represents hundreds of years of service and sacrifice. It's not about looking old-fashioned, it's about keeping the standards that make excellence possible. So, Baker said quietly, shall we proceed with the formal consequences of your actions, or would you prefer to leave with your newfound wisdom and a proper appreciation for what you've learned? In the meantime, 2 palace security officers had arrived, their own military bearing evident in their measured approach. Baker maintained his professional hold on Anderson, waiting for proper procedure to be followed. Guard Baker, the senior security officer addressed him with practiced formality. We'll take custody of the gentleman. The incident has been recorded and the police are on their way. Understood, Baker replied, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that had commanded men in combat. With precise movements, he handed over control to the security officers, each motion showing years of professional training. Smith, now facing the full reality of his actions, stood unsteadily as the officers secured him. His posh shirt was crumpled, his careful image of superiority completely gone. The police! Surely that's not necessary. Assault on a member of Her Majesty's Armed Forces? Colonel Jones interjected, his tone matter-of-fact. It's not just about touching the guard, mate. You tried to disrespect a symbol of army tradition and honor. There are consequences for such actions. Sergeant Major Brown stepped forward, his accent carrying the weight of Allied military justice. Back home, you'd face similar charges for attacking a Marine or any serving member of our armed forces. The uniform demands respect, regardless of nationality. Baker resumed his ceremonial stance, but his eyes remained fixed on Smith. Before you're escorted away, there's something you should understand clearly. His moustache, still perfectly kept despite the brief struggle, seemed to emphasize each word. This incident isn't about you or me. It's about the principles we guard here. The security officers paused, allowing this final lesson to be delivered. The crowd had grown respectfully quiet, parents using the moment to teach their children about consequences and respect. Every day, Baker continued, his voice carrying across the courtyard, we stand here representing not just the Crown, but every soldier who's ever served, every sacrifice ever made, every tradition earned through bravery and courage. When you tried to mock that, you didn't just disrespect me, you disrespected them all." Smith's face showed the first genuine signs of shame. "I never thought—" "That's precisely the problem," Colonel Jones cut in. "You never thought about what this uniform really means, what that moustache truly represents. You saw a surface image and made assumptions that could have cost you far more dearly." "Consider yourself lucky," Sergeant Major Brown added. "I've seen these men in real combat. What you experienced was their restraint, not their capability." Baker's voice took on a tone of professional finality. "The charge will be formal, but your cooperation now will be noted. More importantly, I trust you'll leave here with a new understanding of the difference between ceremony and substance." The security officers began to lead Smith away, but he turned back one last time. "Your moustache," he said quietly, all mockery gone from his voice. How long did it take to earn the right to wear it?" 3 years of active combat service," Baker replied evenly. 2 distinguished conduct medals. 4 fallen comrades whose memory I honor by keeping every detail of this uniform. That's what you tried to disrespect, mate. That's what we guard here." As Smith was escorted towards the waiting police car, Colonel Jones addressed the crowd. "Let this be a lesson to all visitors. These guards are not statues. They're not tourist attractions. They're combat veterans who choose to serve with dignity, keeping traditions earned through hundreds of years of sacrifice." The afternoon sun caught Baker's brass buttons and medal ribbons as he resumed his watch, his moustache once again part of the perfect picture of military precision. But now, the tourists who passed by saw something different. Not just ceremony, but substance. Not just tradition, but truth. The dignified way he had handled the whole incident spoke volumes about why these men were chosen for this duty. It wasn't just about standing still or keeping a moustache to the correct standard. It was about embodying the very principles they were tasked to guard: honor, self-control, and unwavering dedication to duty. So, what do you think about this incident? Tell us in the comments below. And have you ever seen the Queen's Guard or similar military traditions in person? We'd love to hear your experiences. Before you go, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of courage, self-control, and tradition. Hit the bell icon so you'll be notified the moment we upload our next video. We post new content every day at the same time,